The chandelier above Elena Cruz shimmered with cold brilliance, its crystals scattering light across the cavernous ballroom. It was the kind of place she had only ever seen in glossy magazines, velvet curtains spilling like rivers of blood, polished marble floors that whispered with the click of designer heels, and tables lined with champagne flutes so delicate she was afraid even looking at them would cause one to shatter. And yet, here she was, standing among women in gowns worth more than her family's crumbling house, waiting to be paraded. Her fingers trembled where they twisted around a thin strap of her second-hand dress. It wasn't glamorous like the others, no sequins, no daring neckline, no diamonds sewn into silk. It was plain black, the safest thing she could find in a thrift shop, altered hastily to fit her. She had stitched it by hand, every seam a reminder of why she was here. Her brother needed his medication. Her sister's school fees were overdue. The landlord was threatening eviction. Desperation had teeth, and it had bitten her so hard she had no choice but to bleed. Number 12, a woman with a clipboard barked, eyes skimming over Elena like she was nothing more than stock to be catalogued. "You're up soon. Don't slouch. Smile a little, buyers like confidence." Buyers. The word made Elena's stomach twist. This wasn't supposed to feel like an auction block, but it did. They called it a charity gala, whispered about it in shadows as if it were something noble. The official story was that wealthy benefactors bid on companions for a night, all proceeds donated to children's hospitals and orphanages. But everyone knew the truth. These men weren't paying for philanthropy, they were paying for ownership, even if only for a few hours. Elena closed her eyes for a brief moment, inhaling deeply, trying to hold herself together. She wasn't here to be owned. She was here to survive. The curtains rustled. Applause rolled like thunder from the other side. A soft-spoken announcer called the name of the woman currently on stage, describing her as if she were an exotic item, her hair, her eyes, her education. A man's voice rang out with a bid. Another countered. Laughter, murmurs, the clinking of crystal glasses. Elena's pulse skittered. "Number 12, you're next," the clipboard woman hissed. "Head up. Shoulders back. Don't faint out there." Her knees wobbled, but Elena lifted her chin. She would not crumble. Not in front of these people. The curtain parted, and for the first time she stepped into the blinding lights of the ballroom stage. The crowd was a blur at first, too dazzling to focus on. Men in tailored suits, women draped in jewels, all sipping champagne as if human lives weren't about to be exchanged before their eyes. Then her vision sharpened, and she felt it, the weight of dozens of gazes settling on her like hands pressing down on her skin. "Lot number 12, the announcer's silky voice carried across the hall. "A rare beauty, modest yet radiant. Shall we start the bidding at 50,000? 50,000. Gasps, murmurs. A hand shot up almost immediately, then another. The numbers climbed. 60. 75. 100. Elena's breath caught in her throat. These were numbers she couldn't even fathom. More money than her family had seen in years, tossed about like pocket change. But then, something strange happened. The bidding stalled at 150,000. The crowd shifted, murmuring, as if restless. The announcer tried to coax another offer, but silence lingered. And then, a voice. Low. Calm. Dangerous in its certainty. 1 million. The ballroom froze. Head swiveled toward the back of the room. Elena's eyes followed, her pulse racing, until they found him. A man sat in the shadows, posture relaxed, a glass of red wine cradled casually in his hand. He wore a perfectly cut suit, but it wasn't the fabric that made him stand out, it was him. The sheer command in the way he occupied the space, as if he weren't part of the crowd but above it. The announcer stammered. 1 million. Do I hear 1.1? Silence. No one dared challenge him. The man tilted his head slightly, his gaze locking on Elena. For the first time, she felt seen, not as a number, not as a lot on display, but as something else. Something unsettling. The announcer cleared his throat nervously. Sold. To Mr. Damien Black. Applause rippled through the room, polite but tinged with awe. Elena's knees nearly gave out. $1 million. For her. And all she could think was, what kind of man spends that much on a stranger? The applause faded, and the announcer gestured discreetly toward the side curtain. Elena's legs moved as if on instinct, carrying her off the stage before she collapsed under the spotlight. Her palms were slick against the velvet folds of her dress, her chest tight with disbelief. 1 million. For one night. It was a number that could erase every debt choking her family. But at what cost? Behind the curtain, the air was cooler, the voices muffled. Other women waiting their turn glanced at her with wide eyes, envy, pity, judgment, all swirling together. The clipboard woman reappeared, her sharp smile laced with greed. Well, aren't you the lucky one, she said, scribbling notes furiously. Do you have any idea who that was? Elena shook her head, her throat dry. Damien Black. The woman's voice dropped, almost reverent. He doesn't come to these often. When he does, he always gets what he wants. The name sent a shiver through Elena's spine. She'd heard it before, whispered in news segments, splashed across financial articles she didn't fully understand. A billionaire. A tycoon. Ruthless. People said he built empires out of nothing, crushing anyone who stood in his way. And now, he owned her for a night. Her stomach clenched, a knot of fear and curiosity tangling inside her. Mr. Black's driver is waiting. You'll be escorted to meet him shortly. The woman tucked her clipboard under her arm and clicked away, heels snapping against the marble floor. Elena pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady her breathing. She wanted to run. She wanted to vanish through the nearest door and never look back. But the image of her brother, pale and coughing, chained her feet in place. This wasn't about her anymore. It never was. Minutes blurred. The next thing she knew, she was being guided through a side corridor by a man in a sleek black suit, security, no doubt. He said nothing, just opened a discreet door that led outside into the cool night air. A car waited at the curb. No, not a car, a black limousine, polished until it gleamed under the streetlights. The driver, tall and solemn, stepped forward and opened the door. Elena hesitated, her pulse thundering. Once she climbed inside, there was no undoing this. But her siblings' faces rose in her mind again, and she forced herself forward. One shaky step. Then another. Inside, the air smelled faintly of leather and cedar. And there he was. Damien Black. Up close, he was even more intimidating than he'd seemed across the ballroom. The sharp lines of his suit framed a body that spoke of quiet power, but it was his presence, cool, controlled, and utterly unreadable, that stole her breath. He sat with one arm resting on the leather seat, his glass of wine untouched now, his gaze fixed on her as though she were a puzzle he intended to solve. Elena swallowed hard. Mr. Black. Her voice wavered, betraying her. A faint smile tugged at his lips, not warm, but knowing. So you do know who I am. His voice was deep, rich, carrying the effortless authority of someone used to being obeyed. I've heard the name, she admitted. Her hands twisted together in her lap, desperate to stay composed. And yet you came tonight. His eyes flicked briefly to her dress, plain compared to the women he must be used to, then back to her face. Desperation has a way of driving people to unusual places. Heat rose to her cheeks. I'm not desperate, she lied, too quickly. One dark brow lifted, amused at her defiance. You were willing to stand on that stage. That's desperation, miss. She hesitated. Cruz. Elena Cruz. Miss Cruz, he repeated, savoring the syllables like he was testing them on his tongue. Then he leaned forward slightly, the shift so subtle yet so commanding that Elena's breath caught. Do you know why I bid on you tonight? Her heart thudded. She shook her head. Because you were the only one in that room who didn't look like she wanted to be sold, he said simply. You stood there ready to break, but you didn't. I find strength far more interesting than beauty. His words stunned her. She had braced for mockery, or worse, for him to treat her like a trophy he'd bought. Instead, he spoke like a man studying her, not claiming her. I don't understand, she whispered. You will, Damien said. He leaned back again, giving her space, his expression unreadable. You think this is about a night? It isn't. Not for me. The car lurched forward, pulling away from the glittering gala. Outside, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold. Inside, the silence stretched, thick with questions Elena didn't dare ask. Finally, Damien broke it. You'll come to my office tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. My assistant will give you the details. Her head snapped up. Your office. He glanced at her, the faintest trace of amusement ghosting across his features. Yes. Did you really think I spent $1 million for dinner and small talk? Elena's pulse stumbled. Then what do you want? His eyes locked on hers, steady, unreadable. I want your time. 1 month. The words dropped between them like stones in water, rippling outward until they crashed against every thought in her head. 1 month. Not a night. Not an evening. An entire month. She should have refused, should have demanded answers, but all she could do was sit frozen, her world tilting on its axis. Damien Black had rewritten the rules. And Elena Cruz had just stepped into a game she didn't understand. Elena's lips parted, but no sound came out. The hum of the limousine filled the silence, low and steady, as if the car itself carried secrets. A month, she managed finally. That wasn't the agreement. Damien's gaze didn't waver. There was no agreement, Miss Cruz. You stood on a stage. I made a bid. That's all. What happens next is for me to decide. Her stomach twisted. She hated how calm he sounded, how unbothered, as though she were just another contract sliding across his desk. I can't just, she broke off, her voice trembling. I can't disappear for a month. I have responsibilities. Your family. It wasn't a question. Her breath caught. How do you? I do my research. His tone was clipped, businesslike, yet there was something beneath it, a flicker of awareness. Understanding. 2 siblings, correct? Younger. Dependent on you. Elena's nails dug into her palms. The fact that he knew so much about her terrified her, but at the same time, it was the first acknowledgement of her reality anyone in that glittering ballroom had made. They need me, she whispered, her defenses cracking. And they will have you, Damien said evenly. $1 million will go a very long way for them. But I'm not in the habit of paying for one night of awkward conversation. What I want requires more time. Her pulse thudded against her throat. What exactly is it you want from me? He leaned forward slightly, and even though he wasn't close enough to touch her, Elena felt the weight of his presence pressing against her resolve. I want you to work for me, he said at last. 1 month. As my personal assistant. Elena blinked, stunned. Assistant? You'll accompany me to meetings, events, dinners. You'll handle tasks I assign you. In public, you'll stand beside me. In private, you'll stay out of my way. Her mind spun. It wasn't at all what she had imagined. It wasn't what she'd feared. No, this was something stranger. "Why me?" she blurted. "You could hire anyone, someone trained, someone polished, someone who fits your world." For the first time, a shadow of something softer passed over his features. "Because you don't belong in my world. That makes you the most honest person in it." Elena stared at him, words caught in her throat. The driver cleared his throat discreetly from the front. "We've arrived, sir." The limousine slowed to a stop. Elena glanced out the tinted window, expecting a penthouse tower, some intimidating fortress of glass and steel. Instead, she saw a modest townhouse, its warm lights glowing against the night. Her breath caught. "Home." Damien followed her gaze. "I had you driven back to your neighborhood. I imagine your siblings are waiting." Her chest tightened. He wasn't just ruthless, then. He was deliberate. He wanted her to know he could step into her world as easily as she had stumbled into his. The door opened. Cool night air brushed against her skin. Elena hesitated, half in the limousine, half out. She turned back, her eyes searching his. "And if I say no? If I refuse this arrangement?" For the first time, Damien's expression shifted, not anger, not arrogance, but a cool certainty that sent a chill down her spine. "Then you walk back into that house tonight exactly as you left it," he said quietly. "With debts. With bills. With nothing changed." The unspoken part hung heavy in the air, and with no chance of saving her family. He leaned back into the shadows, his voice final. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. My office. The choice is yours." Elena's throat tightened. She stepped out of the car, the night air suddenly sharp in her lungs. The door shut softly behind her, sealing him away. She stood on the cracked sidewalk outside her townhouse, staring at the chipped paint, the sagging roof, the faint glow of the living room lamp where her siblings waited. Her hands shook. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream. But instead, she walked toward the front door, each step heavier than the last. Inside, the world smelled of home, warm broth on the stove, laundry detergent, the faint scent of crayons scattered across the kitchen table. Her brother's laugh drifted from the couch. Her sister's soft singing carried from her room. And with it came the crushing truth: tomorrow morning, she would walk into Damien Black's world. Not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. Sleep was impossible. Elena lay in her narrow bed, the faint hum of the ceiling fan stirring the warm night air, her siblings' soft breathing drifting from the next room. She stared at the cracked plaster of the ceiling, replaying every second of the night before in relentless detail, the chandelier's glow, the cold eyes of strangers, the voice that cut through silence like a blade, 1,000,000. And then Damien Black's face, carved in her memory like stone. She turned onto her side, pulling the thin sheet tighter around her, but the restlessness only grew. It wasn't fear, exactly. It wasn't even anger. It was something harder to name, a collision of disbelief and curiosity. Why me? The question rattled through her like a drumbeat. Out of all the women in that glittering hall, why had he chosen her? She had nothing, no designer gowns, no pedigree, no polished smile. She was plain, ordinary. Replaceable. And yet, he had looked at her like she was anything but. A soft cough pulled her from her thoughts. She sat up immediately, peering toward the cracked door of the next room. Her brother's silhouette shifted in the dim light. The sound was faint but real, a reminder sharper than any thought: this wasn't about her. She pressed her palm to her eyes, swallowing the lump in her throat. Tomorrow wasn't about pride or fear. It was about survival. When dawn finally came, painting the sky in gray and pink, Elena rose quietly. She brewed tea, packed her sister's school lunch, and checked her brother's medicine cabinet, noting the dwindling supply. Every detail reminded her that she couldn't afford to back out now. At 9 o'clock sharp, a sleek black car appeared at the curb. The driver stepped out, polished and silent, holding the door open with the precision of someone who had done it 1,000 times. Elena hesitated for only a heartbeat before slipping inside. The ride was smooth, unnervingly so, the kind of silence that made her hyper-aware of her own breathing. She fiddled with the strap of her thrifted handbag, staring at the blur of traffic and glass towers until the car slowed before a skyscraper so tall it seemed to pierce the clouds. Damien Black's world. The lobby alone was a cathedral of power, gleaming marble floors, a waterfall wall cascading into a pool of glassy water, suits and heels clicking with purpose. Elena swallowed hard, clutching her bag tighter. She felt the receptionist's eyes flicker over her, just for a moment, as if measuring whether she belonged here. The elevator carried her up, higher and higher, until the doors opened into silence. A single hallway stretched forward, ending at massive glass doors that revealed the skyline beyond. And there he was. Damien stood at the window, his silhouette cut sharp against the morning light, hands tucked into his pockets as if he had been waiting for her all along. "Miss Cruz." His voice rolled across the room, deep and steady. He didn't turn, not yet. "You came." Elena drew in a shaky breath. "I told you, I didn't have much of a choice." Now he turned, and the full force of his gaze pinned her in place. "Everyone has a choice. Some simply don't like the cost of refusing." Her pulse stumbled, but she lifted her chin. She wouldn't let him see how much he unsettled her. Damien gestured toward a sleek leather chair opposite his desk. On the desk lay a thick folder, pristine, intimidating. Elena crossed the room slowly, lowering herself into the chair, the leather cool beneath her palms. "What is this?" she asked, nodding toward the folder. "The terms of your employment." His tone was matter-of-fact, but his eyes never left hers. 1 month. Full confidentiality. Absolute discretion. In return, your family will receive the funds I promised. More, if you keep to the agreement. Her stomach twisted. "And if I don't?" "Then you walk away now. Empty-handed." He said it so simply, like tossing away $1 million meant nothing. To him, it didn't. To her, it meant everything. Elena glanced at the folder again, then back at him. "And what, exactly, does being your assistant involve?" Damien's lips curved slightly, not into a smile but into something sharper. "You'll accompany me to business functions. You'll manage certain tasks. You'll present yourself at my side when I need you to. And above all, you'll keep your opinions to yourself unless asked." Her brows shot up. "So basically, I'm decoration." His eyes glinted, amused. "You're already decoration. The question is whether you'll also be useful." Heat flared in her chest, a mix of humiliation and anger. She leaned forward, her voice low. "If you think you can buy my dignity along with my time." "I already did," he interrupted, calm as stone. The air between them snapped tight, charged. Elena's fists clenched in her lap. She wanted to walk out. She wanted to slam the door and tell him he couldn't control her. But then. Her brother's cough, her sister's school fees, the landlord's threats. Damien watched her silently, his expression unreadable. Waiting. Testing. And in that moment, Elena realized this was what he wanted, not obedience, not compliance, but fire. He was measuring her strength the way a jeweler studied the flaws in a diamond. She tore her gaze away, staring at the folder instead. The contract loomed between them, heavy as fate. Her choice sat on the edge of her tongue. Elena reached for the folder, her fingers brushing the smooth leather cover. It felt heavier than it should, as if every page inside carried the weight of chains. She opened it. Lines of text stretched across pristine sheets, crisp black ink spelling out terms in cold, impersonal language, non-disclosure agreements, expectations of discretion, clauses about attendance at events, travel requirements. The deeper she read, the more surreal it felt. There was nothing romantic or scandalous written here, nothing like the whispers that had swirled around the gala. Instead, it was clinical, binding, precise. But the subtext pulsed with unspoken meaning. "You've done this before," she said, her voice quiet, eyes scanning the lines. Damien, seated across the desk, tilted his head slightly. "Of course." She looked up. "So I'm not the first. Does that bother you?" His expression gave nothing away. Her jaw tightened. "It makes me wonder how many women have sat in this chair, wondering what they've gotten themselves into." He leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Enough to know that most break before the month is over." The word struck like a challenge. Elena's spine stiffened. "And you think I will too?" His eyes locked on hers, sharp as glass. "You already want to." The truth of it made her chest ache. She did want to walk out. Every instinct screamed at her to flee this office, to run back to her small, ordinary life, however hard it was. But she couldn't. Not when the stakes were so high. She dropped her gaze back to the pages, scanning faster now. A line made her pause. 24-hour availability, she read aloud. "What does that mean?" "It means exactly what it says." Her head snapped up. "So I don't get a life outside this?" "Outside you?" Damien's mouth curved slightly, though it wasn't amusement, more like a test he knew she'd resist. "For 1 month, your life will orbit mine. That's the agreement." Her fingers tightened on the folder. "And what if I refuse?" "Then we end this conversation, and you return to your debts." His voice was calm, almost too calm, as though the possibility of her refusal meant nothing. "I don't negotiate desperation, Miss Cruz. I offer terms. You accept, or you don't." Elena bristled. "You talk like you own the world." "I do," he said simply. The audacity of it made her breath hitch. It wasn't arrogance, not exactly. It was certainty, born of a man who had never been told no. She looked back at the contract, her eyes catching on the final clause, termination of agreement subject to employer's discretion. Her heart sank. "So even if I survive the month, it only ends if you allow it." Damien's gaze sharpened. "Survive?" Heat rose to her cheeks. "That's what you said. That most women don't last. So what is this, some sort of endurance test?" For the first time, something flickered in his expression, not coldness, not calculation, but curiosity. "Perhaps." Elena exhaled, leaning back in her chair. The city glittered through the window behind him, skyscrapers catching the morning light like shards of glass. She felt small here, swallowed by a world too polished for someone like her. And yet, she wasn't broken. Not yet. She closed the folder, the quiet snap of leather echoing through the room. "You expect me to just sign away my life for a month, with no questions, no guarantees, no protection?" Damien leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. For the first time, his gaze softened, barely, but enough to catch her off guard. "Protection is exactly what I'm offering, Miss Cruz. From the debts. From the vultures waiting to devour what little you have. From a world you're not equipped to fight." The words cut deeper than she expected. He wasn't wrong. She had spent months battling bills, collectors, landlords. She was exhausted. And here he sat, offering a lifeline, one that looked suspiciously like a trap. Her throat tightened. "Why me?" she whispered, unable to stop herself. "Really? Out of everyone you could have chosen, why me?" Damien's eyes lingered on her face for a long moment before he answered. "Because you don't want to be here. And that makes you the only honest one." Her chest constricted. She hated the way those words tugged at her, how they peeled back something raw inside her. I can't promise obedience, she said finally, her voice low but steady. If I do this, I won't be silent just because you expect it. I won't be decoration. Something shifted in Damien's expression, a spark, a flicker of approval. Good. I'd be bored if you were. The air between them thickened, humming with a current she couldn't name. For the first time since the gala, she felt not like prey, but like a player in whatever game this was. Damien slid a pen across the desk, the silver glint catching the sunlight. Then sign, Miss Cruz. And let's see if you last longer than the rest. Elena stared at the pen. Her hand hovered, trembling, her mind spinning through every reason to refuse. But behind her eyes, she saw her brother's pale face, her sister's hopeful smile. Her hand closed around the pen. The pen felt heavier than iron in her hand. Elena stared at the page, her name already typed neatly in the contract header, waiting only for her signature to trap her. Her chest rose and fell quickly, every breath scraping against the walls of her ribs. Damien didn't move. He sat across from her, patient as a statue, his eyes sharp but unreadable. He wasn't pushing her. He wasn't coaxing. He was simply waiting, as if he already knew what she would do. Her pulse thundered in her ears. One stroke of ink and her life would no longer be her own. For 30 days, she would live under his rules, orbiting his world. Could she really do it? Her brother's cough echoed in her mind. Her sister's shy smile as she tied her shoelaces for school. The eviction notice shoved under their door. Her hand trembled. Then, with a sharp breath, she pressed the pen to paper. Her name unfurled across the line, ink glistening black in the sunlight. It was done. The sound of the pen clicking shut seemed to reverberate through the office like the closing of a vault. Damien reached forward, sliding the contract back toward himself. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply tucked it into a leather portfolio, as though she'd just signed a business merger instead of her freedom. Good, he said, his voice calm, measured. Now we can begin. Elena leaned back in her chair, her stomach twisting with equal parts. Dread and relief. So what happens now? Do I fetch your coffee? Organize your calendar? Play the perfect assistant at your side? The corner of his mouth curved, just slightly, a flicker of something like amusement. You'll do all of that. But you'll also listen. Learn. Watch. And you'll do it without question. Her brows drew together. I'm not very good at, without question. I know. His gaze sharpened, pinning her again. That's why you'll be more interesting than the others. The others. The words made her stomach knot, but she forced herself to sit straighter. So what's my first assignment, then? Damien rose smoothly from his chair, moving toward the window. The city stretched behind him, skyscrapers gleaming like blades in the sun. Tonight there's a dinner. Private. Discreet. You'll accompany me. Her throat tightened. Tonight? Yes. You'll be fitted for something appropriate this afternoon. My driver will collect you at 6. She shook her head slightly, the speed of it all overwhelming. You move very fast. His eyes met hers, cool and steady. I don't waste time. Silence stretched between them. The weight of his world pressed around her, the glass, the steel, the impossible height of the office. She felt small, out of place, like a bird caught inside a skyscraper. And yet, she wasn't crushed. Not yet. Her gaze lingered on him, tall and commanding against the city's backdrop. Everything about him screamed control, precision, power. But beneath it, there was something else. Something almost lonely in the way he stood, separate from the world he ruled. Elena tore her eyes away before the thought could settle. I should go, she said, standing quickly. Damien turned back to her. Not yet. Her heart skipped. Excuse me. He reached into a drawer, pulling out a sleek silver phone. He set it on the desk between them. "This is yours for the month. My assistant's number is programmed. Mine as well. You'll answer when it rings. No excuses." Elena stared at the phone, then at him. "You're serious?" "Always." She let out a breath, half a laugh, half disbelief. "Do all your employees get leashes like this?" "No," he said smoothly. "Only the ones I can't afford to lose track of." The word sent a shiver through her she didn't understand. She picked up the phone, the glass cool against her palm, and slipped it into her bag. "Anything else?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Damien studied her for a long moment. His eyes were unreadable, but there was an intensity in them that made her want to look away. She didn't. "Just one thing," he said finally. "Don't mistake this for freedom, Miss Cruz. You signed a contract, not a fairy tale." Her chin lifted. "Maybe I'll be the one to surprise you." For the first time, a real smile ghosted across his lips, small, fleeting, but undeniably there. "We'll see." The dismissal was subtle but clear. Elena gathered her bag, her legs shaky as she walked toward the door. She could feel his gaze following her, steady as a shadow. The hallway outside was silent, the click of her shoes against marble too loud. As the elevator doors closed around her, Elena leaned against the wall, exhaling hard. Her name was inked on the contract. There was no turning back. 30 days. 30 days with Damien Black. And somehow, she knew, they were going to change everything. The sun was sinking by the time Elena stood outside her townhouse, a duffel bag clutched to her side. The car waited again, sleek and polished, the driver expressionless as he opened the door for her. Her siblings had begged her not to go. Her sister had clung to her waist, asking why she had to dress up and leave again. Elena had forced a smile, saying it was just work, that it would help them all. Her brother had watched in silence, his dark eyes too knowing for his years. Now, as the car pulled away from the cracked pavement of her neighborhood and into the glittering heart of the city, Elena felt the distance stretch like a canyon. She didn't belong in Damien Black's world. But tonight, she would have to pretend she did. The car slid to a stop in front of an unmarked building of glass and stone. Inside, the lobby glowed with soft golden light, polished marble underfoot, and a silence so complete it felt reverent. A woman stood waiting by the elevator, tall, elegant, dressed in black. "Elena Cruz?" the woman asked smoothly. "Yes." "Follow me." The elevator swept them upward. Elena tried not to fidget, but the weight of her thrifted clothes pressed heavily against her skin. When the doors opened, they stepped into a boutique unlike anything she had ever seen, walls lined with gowns that shimmered like liquid jewels, mannequins draped in fabrics that seemed spun from starlight. Elena froze. "This is Mr. Black's private atelier," the woman said crisply. "You'll be dressed appropriately for tonight's dinner." Before Elena could respond, a small team descended upon her, seamstresses, assistants, a soft-spoken stylist with measuring tape around her neck. They guided her toward a mirrored platform, speaking in quiet, professional tones as they circled her. Elena's heart hammered as fabric brushed against her skin. She stood still, trying to disappear into herself, but the reflection in the mirror betrayed every flicker of her nerves. "You're tense," the stylist murmured, pinning a swath of fabric along Elena's shoulder. "Don't be. He wouldn't have chosen you if you couldn't carry this." Elena's eyes darted to hers in the mirror. "Chosen me?" The stylist only smiled faintly, as though she knew more than she would ever say. Minutes turned into an hour. Dresses were tried, dismissed, replaced. At last, the team stepped back, satisfied. Elena turned slowly toward the mirror. And her breath caught. The gown they had chosen was deep sapphire, the fabric hugging her curves before spilling into soft folds at her feet. A delicate shimmer caught the light. With every movement, understated yet striking. For once, she didn't look like a girl playing dress-up in borrowed clothes. She looked like someone who belonged. Her throat tightened. She didn't recognize herself. "Perfect," the stylist declared. "Mr. Black will be pleased." The words unsettled her, though she couldn't deny the confidence the gown lent her posture. For the first time, her reflection didn't look entirely fragile. A knock sounded at the door. An assistant poked her head in. "The car is ready." Elena's stomach flipped. This was it. As she descended the boutique's marble stairs, the air seemed to thicken. The car door stood open at the curb. And inside, waiting, was Damien. He looked up as she approached, dressed in a dark suit that sharpened every line of his broad shoulders and strong frame. His gaze swept over her slowly, deliberately, until Elena's pulse raced under the heat of it. "You clean up well," he said simply, his voice smooth but carrying an undercurrent that made her cheeks warm. Her chin lifted instinctively. "Don't sound so surprised." For a fleeting moment, amusement flickered in his eyes. Then he gestured to the seat beside him. The car pulled away, gliding into the night. The city lights painted the glass, flickering across Damien's face, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw. Elena clasped her hands in her lap, fighting the urge to fidget. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. "A private dinner," Damien replied. "Some investors. They'll expect me to arrive with a companion." Elena's brow furrowed. "So I'm a prop." "Your presence," he corrected, his tone deliberate. "There's a difference." She turned to him, searching his face. "And what do you expect me to do? Smile? Nod? Pretend to know which fork to use?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Smile. Nod. Pretend. But don't speak unless spoken to. They'll be curious, but they don't matter. Only I do." The arrogance of it made her jaw tighten, but she bit back her retort. He wasn't joking. She glanced out the window instead, watching the city flash by. Minutes passed in taut silence. Finally, Damien shifted slightly, his voice quieter. "Do you know why image matters, Miss Cruz?" She shook her head. "Because perception becomes power. And power decides who wins." His gaze lingered on her profile, intense and assessing, until she felt her skin flush under it. Elena turned back toward the glass, heart hammering. She had stepped into his world now, and already it felt like the ground beneath her was shifting. The car slowed, pulling up to an opulent building glowing with golden light. Guests in glittering gowns and tuxedos streamed up the steps, laughter and conversation floating into the night. Damien's hand brushed her arm lightly as the driver opened the door. The touch was brief, steadying, but it sent a jolt through her. "Ready?" he asked. Elena swallowed. She wasn't. Not at all. But she nodded anyway. Together, they stepped into the blaze of light. The grand foyer swallowed Elena whole. Marble columns soared toward ceilings painted with gilded frescoes, chandeliers glittered like frozen stars, and laughter spilled like champagne into the air. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns glided through the space as though born to it, moving with a grace Elena couldn't imitate even if she tried. She felt the weight of every jewel, every glance, every soft whisper that rippled as she and Damien crossed the threshold. Her pulse raced. She didn't belong here. But Damien's presence was an anchor. His hand rested lightly at her back, guiding her forward, steady and firm. He didn't speak, didn't need to. Every line of his body radiated authority, his stride unhurried but commanding. Wherever he moved, the crowd seemed to part. Eyes turned toward him, curious, respectful, wary. And then toward her. Elena lifted her chin a fraction higher. If she was going to play this role, she would play it with dignity. A hostess led them into the dining hall, a long table gleaming with polished silverware and crystal glasses. Only a dozen guests had gathered, investors, by the look of them. Their voices lowered as Damien entered. Mr. Black, a man near the head of the table greeted warmly, standing to shake his hand. His suit was tailored, his smile rehearsed. His gaze flicked to Elena, polite curiosity sparking there. And this must be my companion, Damien said smoothly. Miss Cruz. No titles. No explanations. Just her name, delivered with such finality that no one dared question further. Elena forced a polite smile as the man nodded, then returned to his seat. She felt every eye linger on her a heartbeat longer than necessary before turning back to Damien. They were seated midway down the table. A waiter appeared instantly, filling glasses, offering dishes arranged like art. Elena's fingers trembled against the linen napkin in her lap. Relax, Damien murmured beside her, low enough that only she could hear. You look like you're waiting to be devoured. I am, she whispered back, glancing nervously at the glittering silverware. They can smell it. A faint smirk touched his lips. Then don't bleed. Before she could retort, conversation swelled around them. The men spoke of markets, mergers, foreign expansions. The women chimed in with sharp insights, laughter like glass breaking. Elena felt adrift, the words slippery, meaningless, like another language entirely. She focused on the rhythm instead, the way Damien spoke rarely, but each time, silence fell to hear him. The way people leaned in when he lifted his glass, the way deals seemed to bend around his sentences. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. And then it happened. A man across the table, older with silver hair and eyes that gleamed with mischief, gestured toward her with his fork. And Miss Cruz, he said, his voice smooth, teasing. Tell us, how does it feel to sit beside the most ruthless man in the room? The table. The limousine glided through the city streets, its hum barely audible against the silence that stretched thick inside. Elena sat with her hands clasped in her lap, the sapphire gown shimmering faintly in the dim light. Across from her, Damien leaned back, his posture relaxed, but his gaze, when it flicked toward her, was sharp enough to slice through the quiet. Elena's chest rose and fell too quickly. She could still feel the lingering weight of every stare at the dinner table, every question, every laugh that hadn't been entirely kind. But she had survived. She had spoken, she had held her ground, and somehow, she wasn't drowning. She risked a glance at him. You're very quiet. Damien's lips curved, though not into a smile. And you're very observant. She rolled her eyes before she could stop herself. That's not an answer. His gaze lingered on her for a long moment before he said, You surprised me tonight. Elena's breath hitched. That's good. Not necessarily. His tone was even, unreadable. Heat flared in her chest. So what, you wanted me to sit there and look pretty? Smile when spoken to, nod politely. That's what most do, he replied, voice low. And most bore me. She blinked at him, caught off guard. So you wanted me to fail? I wanted to see if you would break. The bluntness of it stole her breath. She turned sharply toward the window, the city lights blurring as the car sped by. Anger burned hot in her chest. And what if I had? Would you have tossed me out? Sent me home with nothing? Damien didn't answer immediately. The silence pressed, heavy and suffocating. Finally, his voice came, quiet but steady. Yes. Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream at him, to demand how he could gamble with her dignity like that. But beneath the anger was something else, something colder. Honesty. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't sugarcoating. And for reasons she didn't want to admit, that truth unsettled her more than the cruelty of it. You're impossible, she muttered, still facing the window. A faint chuckle drifted across the car. "So I've been told." Elena turned back to him, frustration sparking. But what she saw made her pause. For the first time, Damien didn't look entirely untouchable. The hard lines of his face softened slightly in the shadows, his gaze distant. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't cold. He looked tired. She hesitated. "Do you ever get tired of it?" His brow arched. "Of what?" "This," she gestured vaguely. "The games. The power. The tests. Always proving something." Silence again. But this time, it was different. His gaze drifted past her, toward the streaked city lights outside. When he spoke, his voice was lower, quieter. "Power isn't about proving," he said. "It's about never giving anyone the chance to take from you again." The words sank into the space between them, heavy, unspoken. Elena studied him, something tugging in her chest. For the briefest moment, she saw not the billionaire titan who had bought her presence, but a man who had built walls so high no one could breach them. And she wondered what, or who, had made him build them. Before she could ask, the car slowed, pulling to a stop in front of her townhouse. The driver opened the door, the cool night air rushing in. Elena blinked. "You're dropping me off." Damien's gaze returned to her, sharp once more. The softness she thought she'd glimpsed was gone. "Of course. You still have a life outside this, for now." She hesitated, her hand on the door. "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," he said smoothly, "you'll meet me at my office. 10 o'clock. Don't be late." Her pulse fluttered. She nodded once, then stepped out of the limousine. The door closed softly behind her, sealing him away. The car pulled off, its taillights fading into the night. Elena stood there on the cracked sidewalk, the sapphire gown catching the glow of the streetlight. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The night had been surreal, a test she hadn't expected to pass. And yet, the memory of his words clung to her, threading through her thoughts like smoke. Power is about never giving anyone the chance to take from you again. What had he lost? She shook the thought away and walked inside. Her brother stirred on the couch, her sister's soft humming drifted from the bedroom. The ordinary sounds of home wrapped around her, grounding her, reminding her why she was doing this. But still, her mind wandered back to Damien Black. To the storm of him. To the way his eyes had softened, just once, before he hit it again. And as she lay awake in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, one truth pressed down on her with relentless certainty. She had stepped into his world. And it was already changing hers. The elevator doors opened to the 37th floor with a soft chime, spilling Elena into Damien Black's empire. The office was unlike anything she had seen before. Glass walls stretched from floor to ceiling, revealing the city sprawling below like a glittering map. Desks gleamed under pools of light, their surfaces so immaculate they might have been carved from ice. People in sleek suits moved briskly, eyes sharp, voices hushed. Every detail radiated precision, control, wealth. Elena's second-hand heels clicked too loudly against the polished floor. Her thrifted blouse and skirt, chosen with desperate care that morning, felt like costume pieces in a play where she didn't belong. Heads turned. Some looks lingered. A woman at reception raised a perfectly arched brow, eyes flicking over Elena before snapping back to her computer. Elena's cheeks burned. She wanted to shrink, to vanish into the glossy floors. But she forced her chin higher. If Damien thought she would cower in front of his staff, he was mistaken. "Miss Cruz." The voice was smooth, efficient. A young man in a tailored suit approached, tablet in hand. His smile was polite but distant. "Mr. Black is expecting you. This way, please." Elena followed him down the corridor, every step an exercise in keeping her back straight. Through open doors, she glimpsed offices buzzing with energy, walls lined with art that probably cost more than her entire neighborhood. Everything gleamed with success, with money. And in the middle of it all, she felt like a shadow. They stopped at a pair of towering glass doors. The young man tapped lightly, then opened them. Damien stood inside, his back to the room, gazing out at the skyline. Morning sunlight streamed across him, outlining the broad lines of his shoulders beneath his tailored suit. His presence filled the space effortlessly, as if the city itself bent around him. "You're late," he said without turning. Elena blinked. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was exactly 10 o'clock. "I'm on time," she said carefully. Now he turned. His eyes found hers, sharp, unyielding. "On time is late. Early is expected." Her jaw tightened. "Noted." The faintest hint of amusement flickered across his face before he gestured to a chair near his desk. "Sit." She obeyed, though the command rankled. He picked up a file from his desk and slid it toward her. "Today, you'll observe. You'll keep notes. You'll learn how things are done here." She looked at the file. It was thick, filled with graphs and contracts she couldn't begin to understand. "And what if I don't?" His gaze sharpened. "Then you'll learn the cost of wasted time." Elena held his stare, refusing to flinch. For a moment, the air between them felt charged, the same invisible current that had sparked at the dinner table. A knock interrupted. A tall woman entered, her stride confident, her sleek suit flawless. She carried a stack of documents, which she set briskly on Damien's desk. "Clarification on the Dubai acquisition. I've scheduled a follow-up for Thursday." "Good," Damien replied, signing a page without looking up. Clara's eyes flicked toward Elena, then back to Damien. "And, may I speak freely?" Damien glanced up, one brow arched. "Always." Clara hesitated only a fraction of a second before continuing. "With all due respect, Mr. Black, shadowing arrangements are usually reserved for trainees with relevant experience. Bringing someone like," her gaze lingered on Elena for a beat too long, "into these circles may give the wrong impression." The air stilled. Elena's chest tightened. She expected Damien to ignore the comment, or worse, agree. Clara was competent, indispensable, surely her words carried weight. But Damien set his pen down deliberately and leaned back in his chair. His gaze was cool, sharp. "The impression I give," he said evenly, "is mine to decide. Not yours." Clara's composure slipped, just for an instant. Then she nodded quickly, murmured something about the files, and left the office. The silence she left behind was thick. Elena stared at Damien, her heart thundering. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. He looked at her, expression unreadable. "Do what?" "Defend me." His lips curved faintly, though not into a smile. "I wasn't defending you, Miss Cruz. I was reminding my staff that their opinions don't dictate my decisions." Elena studied him, searching for the truth beneath his words. For all his coldness, something about the way he had spoken to Clara felt personal. Protective, even if he would never admit it. "You don't care what they think?" she asked. "I care about results," he replied simply. "And whether or not you realize it yet, you're part of those results." Her pulse quickened. She wanted to argue, to demand what he meant, but the intensity of his gaze stole the words from her tongue. A knock at the door broke the moment. An assistant poked his head in, announcing Damien's next meeting. Damien stood, adjusting his cufflinks with smooth precision. "Come," he said to Elena. "You'll see something worth noting." She rose, gathering her notebook, though her mind was still tangled around his words. Part of the results. What did that even mean? As they walked down the hall, she felt the curious stares again. But this time, something had shifted. Clara's words, Damien's response, they echoed in her. Maybe she didn't belong here. Maybe they all knew it. But Damien had made it clear, she was here because he wanted her here. And for now, that was enough. By the time the sun began to sink, the office had quieted. Phones stopped ringing, voices faded, footsteps thinned to a trickle in the corridors. Elena sat at Damien's desk, her notebook filled with pages of scribbles that meant little but reminded her she had survived her first day. Damien was still at the window. He had stood there for nearly 10 minutes, silent, his profile carved in the fading light. The city glowed beneath him, skyscrapers catching fire as the sun dipped. Elena closed her notebook gently. Do you ever stop? His head tilted slightly. Stop what? Working. Controlling. Watching. He turned then, his gaze steady, but softer than she expected. No. She let out a quiet laugh. That's honest, at least. Honesty is rare, Damien said. Most people prefer masks. Her eyes lingered on him, curiosity burning. And what's yours? For a moment, silence stretched. She thought he wouldn't answer, that he would brush her off with the cold precision he always used. But instead, he moved closer, leaning against the edge of his desk, folding his arms loosely. My mask, he said quietly, is that I don't need anyone. That I built everything alone. That I can't be broken. The words sank deep, heavier than she expected. There was no bravado in his voice, no arrogance, just raw truth, sharpened by experience. Elena swallowed. And is it true? His eyes flickered, the faintest crack in his composure. It has to be. Her chest tightened. She wanted to ask more, to pull at the threads of that confession, but the air between them felt too fragile to push. Instead, she leaned back slightly, her voice softer. Everyone needs someone, Damien. Even storms have to break over land eventually. Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, maybe even recognition. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by his usual cool control. You speak like a poet, he said. She smiled faintly. Or maybe just someone who's lived without safety nets for too long. They held each other's gaze, the silence between them charged. It wasn't the tense silence of the boardroom or the heavy quiet of the limousine, it was something else, something unspoken but alive. And then, abruptly, he pushed away from the desk, straightening his jacket as though slipping his armor back on. You should go, he said smoothly. It's late. The sudden distance stung more than she expected. But she stood, gathering her things, determined not to let him see it. As she moved toward the door, he spoke again, his voice low. Miss Cruz. She turned. Don't mistake moments of honesty for weakness, he said. I don't show them often. And I don't show them twice. Her breath caught. She wanted to respond, but no words came. Instead, she nodded once and left. The elevator hummed softly as it carried her down. Elena's reflection stared back at her in the mirrored walls, tired, uncertain, but alive with something she couldn't name. By the time she stepped out into the cooling evening, the city lights were blazing, the streets alive with movement. She pulled her bag tighter to her shoulder, her thoughts tangled. Damien Black wasn't just power and precision. Beneath the mask, there was a man scarred by something he hadn't yet revealed. And Elena couldn't stop wondering, what would it take to break through the rest of that armor? Her phone buzzed suddenly. The silver one. Damien.